All right, we're starting. We're going to talk a little bit about propagation because it's always fun to get free plants from your existing plants. So, yeah. So we'll talk a little bit about propagation. So it can be from seeds, from cuttings, dividing, and air layering. And we're not going to talk that much about air layering because it's kind of a specialized case. So we'll mostly be talking about seeds, cuttings, and dividings. So seed starting materials, vermiculite. Do I use vermiculite that much? Sometimes vermiculite is that volcanic stuff that kind of puffs up. So it helps the soil keep a little bit of moisture in it. Perlite are those little white balls. Here, I'll pluck one out of here. They're kind of these little white balls that you see in soil. That makes it drain a little bit more. I already talked about peat moss. We try to stay away from using peat moss because it is, pulled out of some pretty sensitive areas, peat bogs. So we use more like coconut coir for that, or just potting soil or seed starting mix. And usually I use square 4-inch pots, but you can use anything that you kind of have around. Outdoors, I have a nice glass table that has a little bit of an umbrella over it, so it's a little bit of a shady area. Sometimes I do things there, do it wherever. Indoors, if I'm doing like tomatoes or something and I'm trying to get a jump on the season, I might do them indoors. And you can see there's a little bit of a heat mat under here. That does help with things like tomato seeds and pepper seeds and things like that to get them germinating a little bit faster. I've changed my methods over time with seed starting. I have found that, I have read also that once the plant germinates, those little seedlings are surprisingly hardy. So you know how they want you to have these grow lights and keep the light really close to the plants and stuff? Once the plants come up now, I actually put them outside, like pretty much right away. They're still in kind of a protected area that gets good light, but I'm not babying them with a lot of indoor lights. So, but right now, if you're going to start seeds, you can do it all outdoors. You don't really need to do anything indoors. We've got plenty of good light. They do need some protection. They actually need protection, seedlings need protection from rain. Raindrops are pretty tough on little seedlings, and that's why I put them either in a protected space or under an umbrella or something like that. So, cuttings, I'm going to do a little bit, I'll do a little bit of seed starting. It's not too hard. Let's see, I have 2 types of seeds here today. I have some Arroyo lupin. Lupinus succulentus. This is a nice annual. Actually, both the ones that I'm doing are annuals. Oh. I use like a little pencil or something to kind of just poke some little holes in. And I do several seeds, Actually, this is the other one. So I poke several little holes. These are pretty big seeds. Fairly big. They're like the size of a radish seed. I know you probably are not going to be able to see that. But these are pretty big, so they're pretty easy. You can poke a little hole if they're kind of bigger. And then just, 1 or 2 seeds per hole. And we'll give away these too. And there we go. And then just kind of poke them down a little bit. Cover it up with a little soil, water, you're done. And you just have to be patient, and you have to keep them watered. You do have to be patient. Some seeds take a long time to germinate. I also have some Phacelia called Lacy Phacelia. This is great for pollinators. They love this plant. So these are kind of tiny. These are more like carrot seeds if you guys do any of those. Does anybody do seed starting? Just a couple people. Oh, you should do it. It's really fun. And, you know, other than patience, it doesn't take much, and it's very cheap. And I usually try to keep, so this is like one of my camping bins for washing dishes, but I use it for my little seed starting table because it's nice and deep and it's really good. So I try to keep some old potting soil in there, and occasionally I'll put in some nice compost and kind of mix that in. And it's good if you're doing seed starting, it would be good to wet whatever mix you're using. So if you're buying some seed starting mix, it would be good to wet it a little bit before you start the seeds. I didn't do that. I needed dry things in the car this morning. So, yep, so those are there. So that's, I mean, that literally, that's as easy as it gets. And as long as you protect it, sometimes the squirrels will kind of dig around in there and have their own ideas on what should be planted. So sometimes I'll do like a little chicken wire cage over the top just to keep the squirrels out. Okay? So seed starting, super easy. Any questions about that? All right. Taking cuttings, yes.
Sorry, I had a question. Is starting seeds something you do all year round, or is it indoor activity, is it indoor activity, outdoor activity?
Is seed starting something you do all year round, indoor activity, outdoor activity? It depends. Certain seeds are tougher than others, and there is, I think I have a reference on, if you wanted to do native plants, if they're, say, perennials, shrubs, trees, they're a little bit more difficult, and there are some special requirements that you need. Sometimes the seeds need to have a cold treatment, so they need to be in the refrigerator. Sometimes they need to be roughed up a little bit, like you have to like kind of file the seed coating. Actually, the lupin is, they typically are better if you soak them or kind of rough them up, which I did not do. Yeah, so there are some seed treatments. Annuals, you can do any time. And these are, even though it's a lupin, it is an annual. So you can start annuals really any time of the year. If you want to have California poppies all year round, just keep starting them in some pots and things, and you will get them. All right? Any other questions on seed starting? Yes, ma'am. Seeds in the ground, yes, of course you can do that. Now, most of our native seeds like to be sown in the fall. So you can't really do that right now. Some of them need a little bit of cold. So, but yes, you can do it in the ground. You might need to, if you wanted, I wouldn't do it now. You know, I would wait until the fall, and then I would, that's a good time to kind of scruff up a little area, rough it up if you have kind of a bare area, so rough it up with something. You know, I have like this little 3-prong tiller that you could kind of rough it up with, just a hand tool. And then put the seeds in. You could cover it with some fine soil, and then I would protect it in some way. If you could put some chicken wire or something over it and maybe pin down the chicken wire, or a little shade cloth, a little piece of shade cloth, and kind of pin that down. You're going to have to check it a little bit, but just to keep the birds out, because they will eat it. You know, they're hungry in the fall. Yeah, but you can definitely do it. I love to start seeds when it's raining. That's another really good time. So for a long time I had trouble starting carrots. I finally figured out the secret to it. But I used to go out when it was raining and sow carrot seeds because they always seem to germinate then. So, all right? Any other questions on seed starting? We're going to talk about cuttings. Taking cuttings, they're faster than starting from seed because you're actually starting with a piece of a plant, and you're getting a plant a lot sooner. It's an exact duplicate of the parent, which can be good if you really, you know, something has a specific color or leaf shape or something. But it also can be bad because seeds have a lot more diversity in them than a cutting does. So seeds are created when usually a bee or some other pollinator goes to several different plants. So you're getting some gene mixing in there. So that diversity is really good. So that's something you should think about. Bottom heat can help on certain seeds, and you could use 1 part peat to 5 part perlite or just pure perlite. I'm starting to do more just pure perlite. From cuttings, again, you have to kind of know where the plant is from. So when I say mostly perlite, that's actually for things that are more chaparral-y, things that like really good drainage. They're going to do better. I used to try to root in just regular garden soil with some of the chaparral plants. Bad. They always got like a fungus, okay? So the perlite is really good. It drains really well, but it's also, you have to keep up on the watering because it does drain so well. Okay. Propagating is easiest when the plants are actively growing. If the plant is in kind of a dormant stage, it's going to be a lot harder to propagate that. So it's great if you see that the plant is starting to grow, that's a great time to try to propagate it, okay? Some plants you can do all year. I've heard that sticky monkey flower, Mimulus aurantiaticus, you can do all year round. The monkey flowers are a little bit easier. You can divide grasses, that's a little different. That's dividing, not propagating, but it's kind of the same. Some cuttings of soft perennials are very easy. Seaside Daisy, super, super easy. Coral bells. This is Heuchera Maxima, and we're going to talk about that. California Fuchsia, again, you can still do California Fuchsia, and that, for a lot of that, you can just dig up a clump and put it someplace else. And if it's raining and stuff, it's going to do great. Same thing with the Seaside Daisy. If I'm pruning it, a lot of times I'll just pop it someplace else when it's raining. Now it's a little bit harder to do it now. When it's raining, it's a little bit easier. Coyote Mint, I have some Coyote Mint. We're going to start that. Hummingbird sage is also very easy. Willows, super easy, but you may not want that. Snowberries, sticky monkey flowers I talked about, penstemon, mallows, the dogwoods, because they're kind of creekside, so they're very easy. Okay. We're going to talk about heucheras, or coral bells, and I'll show you a little bit about how I propagate that. This is a really good one to propagate because they have a tendency to get kind of ugly. So what happens with the coral bells or the heucheras, this is Heuchera Maxima. It's our native heuchera. It's a very, really nice plant, very vigorous growing. But what happens is you start to get these long brown stems. So I cut these this morning from some plants that I had in the back. So you get these really ugly kind of brown stems, and they just don't look that good. So that's a really good time to propagate them. And again, I would say early spring would probably be better for this than right now, but I'm sure that right now it'll still grow. So you can see I'm just kind of cleaning this up a little bit, just taking all the icky stuff off. So this brown is really not going to do anything for me. And then you can kind of see that it's a little bit green up at the top. That's really more what I want. So I just take that off. And now when we are propagating, we're playing this game of we've got to keep this plant hydrated enough so that it'll grow, but not too hydrated so it rots. So it's a little bit difficult. So we can make it easier if we get rid of a lot of the big leaves. This looks brutal, doesn't it? But if we can get rid of a lot of the big leaves, then it's going to transpire less. So all of these leaves will transpire. They get rid of water. That's part of photosynthesis. They get rid of water. But we want this guy to keep as much water as possible to stay nice and hydrated, okay? So I'm taking it down to some really teeny tiny leaves. If you have some big leaves like this, so you don't have teeny tiny leaves, you can actually just cut sort of the big leaf in half, and that's going to make it transpire less. But I have these nice little leaves. Okay, now I'm wearing gloves. I have some root tone or rooting hormone. Now, for this talk, I brought my little mask. This is a VOG mask. They're reusable, so I like to use something like that. But I'm not going to put it on because I got the microphone. But this stuff is a little It's got some warnings on it. So I like to use lots of precautions. So, but it does, so it's rooting hormone. It's going to help the plant to root more. Now, if you don't like stuff like this is a powder. If you don't like stuff like this, you can actually soak willow branches in water and make your own rooting hormone. Willows sprout really easily. So I poured a little bit in this cap. Again, this would be nice if it was wet, but it's not. And I'm going to poke a little hole. Oh, we'll do 2. Okay. Poke a little hole. Not deep enough. And just pop that baby in there. I have it labeled. I reused labels. So, and I have a little, I have like a little kind of grease pen that I use, because then I can use the labels over and over again. Okay, so just pop that in, water it well, keep it out of the sun, someplace where it gets sort of bright light but no direct sunlight, and just keep watering it. Almost guaranteed that it will root. I'm going to do one more, because I happen to have one more, so you'll know the process. This one has 2 little sprouts on it, but it's got an ugly bit at the top, so I'll get rid of that. Okay. And I learned how to do this. I kept asking people, how do you propagate heucheras? They've got these long brown stems. They look so awful. What do I do? YouTube video. There's a little British guy. How to propagate your heuchera. So you can find YouTube videos for everything. That's not a good stem. That's not a good stem. I just need a couple of leaves. There we go. So you get the idea. So same thing. The rooting hormone, this is powder, but you can also do a liquid. The professionals, I'm not professional, the professional propagators, they usually use a liquid, so they can do it a stronger dilution. They can make a stronger dilution. It's a concentrate, so they can make a stronger or weaker dilution depending on what the plant is. But I just use this because I have it. Okay, there's another one. Water that in well, and that will do it. All right? Pretty easy, right? Yes?
If there's a flower on it, you take that off.
Ah, flowers. Yes, thank you for asking that. If there's a flower on it, should you take it off? That's a very good question, because yes, you should take it off. If you can find a branch that does not have a flower, that's going to root a little bit easier, so I've been told. So yes, take off the flowers and see if you can find a branch without a flower would be better, okay? Any questions on that? Yes, ma'am.
What about rooting in water?
Yes!
I do that with fuchsias, new growth.
Okay, not California fuchsias.
No.
Yeah. So everybody always asks that. Thank you. I'm really glad that you asked that. So rooting in water, no. It doesn't work with drought-tolerant plants. It's really better for tropical plants or really plants that have a really juicy, sort of watery stem. It does not work with drought-tolerant plants. You really need to do, if it's chaparral, it really needs to be the perlite that I talked about. Something like the heuchera, they can take a little bit of a richer soil, so you can just do it in regular soil. Any other questions about that? You saw it. You don't need to need it. Okay, we did that. All right, dividing. I also like to talk a little bit about dividing because that's very easy. And there's a real trick with our native iris. So a lot of iris, and if you've grown the bearded iris, you know that they kind of have this rhizome and they start to grow out like that. And then before you know it, you have this big dead spot, right? It doesn't look very good. So I'm not talking about bearded iris, I'm talking about our native iris, but they both do that. So with our native iris, after say 3 to 5 years, you'll start to get a little bit of a dead spot. That's a great time to divide it. However, they've bloomed already in the spring. This is a plant that's actually going through they take a break. They're resting in the summer, and they won't start growing again until late October, early November. So you really can only divide them at that point in time. So here's a clump that I had. I just used a digging fork to kind of pop it out of the ground. And here's what you'll see. Here's what you need to look for. These little pink tips, those are kind of the growing tips. That means it's starting to grow. Fabulous. You can divide it. Almost 100% success with these. Same kind of thing. You're just going to break it apart, get rid of some of the ugly, gnarly roots and bits to it, divide it. Again, just a small little bit will work. And you can clip the fronds, just like I was saying before, so that plant is not going to transpire as much. So again, dividing these late October, early November, very, very easy, and kind of clip them back. You don't even have to put them in a pot. You can just put them into the garden where you want them, and they'll be fine. All right, any questions on that? I said I was going to skip the air layering. It's really more of, not very many plants you can air layer, so I'm just going to kind of skip that. Move that on. Propagation resources. There's a great book on seed propagation of native plants by Dara Emery. That's kind of the classic, and it's really boring reading because it's just tables of what the plant name is and then how you need to treat the seed in order for it to germinate. But if you think you might get into that, it's a very helpful resource. There's Growing California Native Plants. The original by Marjorie Schmidt has lots of information on propagating. If you can find an original version, it's really good. There's a new reprint, but there's a little bit less information on propagating. Lots of YouTube videos. And there's the California Native Plant Society has a Gardening with Natives listserv, and you can find lots of information there on how to propagate, or you can ask questions on how to propagate.